White room torture. White room torture is a type of psychological torture that focuses on complete isolation. The prisoner is kept in a cell with no windows or doors, depriving them of all senses. Visually, the prisoner is deprived of all color. Their cell is completely white, the walls, floor, and ceiling, as well as clothing and food. As for taste and smell, the prisoner is fed white food, classically unseasoned rice, to deprive them of these senses. Auditorily, the cell is soundproof and devoid of any sounds, voices, or social interaction. Prisoners hear nothing but themselves. Prisoners are often kept in captivity for months or even years. Scaphism, one of the most sophisticated and cruel ways to kill a person. The victim was placed in a boat and covered in honey and milk, attracting insects. They were then fed the same mixture, causing vomiting and defecation, which further increased the influx of insects. The victim was subjected to continuous bites and an invasion of insects, penetrating the body through any openings, until he died from exhaustion, infections, and shock. This excruciating procedure was repeated every morning, turning the execution into torture, sometimes lasting for weeks. There is a known case of one person holding out for 17 days before dying. I think only 3% of the fastest people can like this video and subscribe to the channel before the video starts in. 3, 2, 1. Comment done if you did it on time. Uncomfortable position. One of the methods of causing painful sensations in which the tortured person is forced to take an uncomfortable body position and maintain it for a long time. It has found wide application due to the fact that after this procedure, there are very rarely any obvious traces of external violence left on the victim's body. Being in an extremely uncomfortable position for a long time, the interrogated person subconsciously considers himself, and not the interrogator, to be the source of pain and discomfort, which leads to an internal psychological conflict that quickly depletes the resources of the nervous system. Torture by music. Music has been used many times as a torture or strong psychological impact on prisoners. The volume of the music, acoustic shock, its aggressiveness, duration, and cultural unacceptability for the victim all play a role. Hard rock is usually used as a torture instrument. A similar method of torture was used in prisons. Prisoners are played music at maximum volume, including at night, depriving them of sleep. At night, torture is usually accompanied by bright spotlights in the cells. For 16 hours, prisoners were forced to listen to loud music. Then there were 4 hours of absolute silence and darkness. Staging and execution, a type of torture or psychological pressure that consists of simulating preparations for the death penalty of a person who is subjected to pressure. In some cases, the mock execution is arranged with the aim of obtaining some kind of confession. The person is blindfolded, forced to dig his own grave. A gun is put to his head, expecting that the fear of death will force him to agree to certain demands of the torturers. Sometimes a mock execution is carried out on an already pardoned convict who does not know this and is preparing for death. Drinking torture. A method of torture in which the victim is forced to drink large amounts of water in a short period of time, which leads to distension of the stomach, water poisoning, and possibly death. Often, the victim's mouth is forcibly held open, jaws unclenched, and nose plugged. The liquid is introduced through a funnel or a piece of cloth pushed down the throat. To avoid choking, the victim is forced to swallow the injected liquid, including urine or bile. The torturers may periodically strike the swollen stomach, which causes vomiting, and the torture is repeated from the beginning. Witch's chair. This torture device is a chair equipped with spikes and handcuffs, with blocks to fix the victim's position and an iron seat that could be heated by fire. This common torture device was especially widely used by the Austrian Inquisition. In 1693, one woman was put on the witch's chair and spent 11 days and nights on it, while the executioners burned her legs with a red-hot iron. She went mad from the pain and then died under torture, but never confessed to any crime. Pit with snakes. One of the torture methods in which prisoners were tied up and slowly lowered into a snake pit on a rope. Moreover, it was used not only in the Middle Ages during the Second World War. Japanese militarists tortured prisoners in a similar way in South Asia. Often, the interrogated person was brought to the snakes, pressing his legs to them. A popular torture used on women was when a snake was brought to the interrogated person's naked chest. They also really like to bring poisonous reptiles to women's faces. Mask of shame. It was a metal structure placed on the head. It included a gag that suppressed any attempts by the victim to speak. The inside of the gag was studded with spikes that tore the tongue at the slightest movement. This weapon was used to publicly humiliate women accused of excessive chatter or gossip, depriving them of the ability to speak and demonstrating their powerlessness in the face of public condemnation. Spanish boot. The Spanish boot is a torture device that uses compression of the knee and ankle joints, muscles, and shins. The classic Spanish boot, which was used in France and the British Isles, consisted of two boards with the interrogated person's foot between them. These boards were the inner part of a machine that pressed on them as wooden stakes were driven into it, which were driven into special sockets by the executioner. The Heretic's fork. The device was a rigid collar equipped with two pairs of sharp metal teeth. One row of teeth rested on the victim's chin, the other on the sternum. Fixed on the neck, this instrument caused unbearable pain and deprived the ability to lower the head, causing extreme exhaustion from insomnia. The victim could be interrogated, but more often he was left to suffer until the teeth slowly but surely pierced the skin, muscles, and cartilage of the neck and jaw. The torment continued until the victim could no longer hold his head in a forced position. Rack, a stock, a torture device that stretches the victim's body while simultaneously tearing the joints. A person was placed on the rack and tied to the gates by his arms and legs with a rope. When the executioner pulled them, the person began to experience unbearable pain, primarily because his limb joints were slowly dislocated. This caused tension and rupture of the ligaments, and with greater effort, muscles. Torture by rats. The torture was carried out as follows. One or more rats were placed on the victim's stomach and covered with a bowl or bucket, and coals were poured on top. Overcome by heat, the rat tried to get out, but it was impossible to gnaw through a metal or clay bowl. Only the material at the bottom yielded to the teeth, and the rat, with extreme zeal, began to make its way first through the skin and muscles, and then through the person's insides. Blood eagle. This is the name of a barbaric ritual in which the victim's ribs were cut, torn from the spine, and spread out like wings. The lungs were then removed through the resulting holes, resulting in a painful and prolonged death. Sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is the lack or complete absence of sleep. Various forms of deprivation of basic human needs, including sleep, have been used as torture methods. During the Vietnam War, American pilots captured by the Viet Cong in North Vietnam were tied or shackled to a chair and forced to sit for days without changing their position, while not being allowed to sleep.
I don't think you'll be able to click on my next video before time runs out. 3, 2, 1.